Hello, is anybody there?
Man, this is Anderson Tenio. I can hear you. I can see you.
Hi, this is Roger Waldron. I can see you and hear you.
I think it could be quite a while since it's voting, isn't it?
Hi, everyone. We're resolving one small technical issue, and then we'll be ready to get started in just a minute.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to begin? Please begin your 5-second countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. I call this hearing to order. A quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We have a number of members participating remotely today, and before we proceed, I'd like to go over some items for our members participating remotely. First, if you're experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so those issues can be resolved immediately. Members participating remotely must continue to use the video function for the duration of their participation in the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. It is committee and subcommittee policy that members participating remotely will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning on your microphone on and off during an in-person hearing. This is out of courtesy to all members on the committee and so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you're recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for a couple of seconds before speaking so that we'll be able to hear everything you say. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand using the WebEx raise hand function, unmute your microphone, and ask to be recognized. In order to ensure that everything members say is captured on the live stream of this hearing, members are asked to pause for 2 to 3 seconds before beginning to speak. If you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Please keep in mind that you will need to refresh the repository page as it does not automatically update. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of committee seniority for questioning witnesses today. This will make it easier for me to ensure that all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Does any member have a question about the conduct of this hearing with members participating remotely? Seeing none, I now recognize myself for an opening statement. So welcome, everyone. Today's Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee hearing will examine the Department of Veterans Affairs medical supply chain. One important question is, what lessons have we learned from the pandemic? As the nation's largest integrated healthcare system, VA purchases billions of dollars in vital life-saving medical supplies and equipment each year in order to serve millions of American veterans. Unfortunately, VA's purchasing and inventory management system has long faced many serious problems. Just last year, the Government Accountability Office added VA acquisition to its high-risk list, largely due to medical supply chain challenges. The media has also chronicled many instances of supply problems impacting veterans' health care, even long before this pandemic. For example, the VA Medical Center in Washington, D.C. canceled and rescheduled medical procedures between 2015 and 2018 because it did not have the needed medical supplies on hand. As GAO will testify, VA medical centers have experienced back orders for as much as 22% of medical supply items that are generally provided by VA's main supply vendors, including needles, alcohol pads, tissues, and even garbage bags when medical centers needed them. The ongoing pandemic dramatically exposed weaknesses of the supply chain. First, VA struggled to get a handle on which hospitals were facing shortages. Because of an antiquated inventory system, VA established a new but still manual system for gathering and reporting daily supply levels to its hospitals. They use common spreadsheets to track supplies with information phoned in by each hospital. As a result, during the early weeks of the pandemic, VA scrambled to contract with inexperienced vendors, and when some were unable to fill orders, supply deliveries were delayed. It's important to point out that VA hospital staff and leadership worked tirelessly to procure the needed supplies as the severity of the pandemic grew. We all should commend their dedication and creativity during an extraordinarily challenging time. We also saw many other examples of dedicated people helping our veterans during the pandemic. I can report with pride that in my home state of New Hampshire, we stepped up. Since the pandemic began, New Hampshire arranged 15 shipments of personal protective equipment sourced from across the globe through close partnership with the public and private sectors. 10 of those shipments included PPE specifically for VA, including one with 4.5 million masks, another with 400,000 gowns, and the list goes on. These PPE deliveries, reimbursed by the state to private partners with CARES Act funding, made a big difference to many of our veterans and VA employees, and it's one of the many examples of where Americans went the extra mile to help stem the challenges that COVID-19 brought. However, our veterans deserve a permanent solution. The department needs a modern and effective acquisition and inventory system. VA is years away from this goal, and it has been grappling with this issue for some time. VA launched the Medical Surgical Prime Vendor Program in 2004. However, it faced many problems and shortfalls. VA then tried the Medical Surgical Prime Vendor Next Generation Program in 2016, and again, things did not go as well as hoped. VA is now planning the Medical Surgical Prime Vendor 2.0 program, which is supposed to launch in 2021. So you heard that correctly. VA has made 3 attempts since 2004. And there's more information here. VA is now planning to transition to DoD's existing prime vendor program, and VA already is taking steps to replace its medical surgical prime vendor 2.0 program before the program has really even started. VA also has plans to transition all its medical centers to DoD's integrated supply inventory tool, but this transition is scheduled to take up to 7 years. All of VA's supply chain initiatives create a dizzying array of overlapping efforts and some confusion. I hope to hear from VA how its current plans for creating a modern medical supply chain will prove successful. During today's hearing, we will also examine steps by VA to address medical supply shortages stemming from the pandemic. For example, VA is establishing regional readiness centers to store 6-month stockpiles of masks, gloves, and other critical supplies. I applaud this attempt to put in place important lessons that were learned during the pandemic. However, I understand these centers will not be fully operational until July of 2021, which seems too far off into the future. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses during today's proceedings. Veterans and hospital staff should have the confidence that VA's medical supply chain is modern, effective, and efficient. With that, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Bergman for 5 minutes for any opening comments he has.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome our witnesses today to discuss strengthening the VA medical supply chain. I know Ms. Brazil, Ms. Kramer, and Mr. Centennial have been working around the clock for many months now to support VA's pandemic response. Again, thank you again. I would also like to recognize Ms. Oakley and her team at GAO for their great work going back a number of years on improving VA contracting. Lastly, I want to express my appreciation, Mr. Chairman, for your support in calling Mr. Waldron to testify. While he is technically a minority witness, I think we will all benefit from his expertise in government procurement. Many Americans have never given much thought to our supply chains. Our over-reliance on China was obvious, but the national security implications were rarely discussed outside of think tanks. The Fukushima earthquake in 2011 was a warning for many international companies, but its impact was more limited. Today is different. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended supply chains across the economy and impacted all our lives. In particular, many companies in the pharmaceutical and medical supply industries are still experiencing constrained production and a soaring demand. VA relies on the same battered medical supply chains as private health care providers, state and local governments, and other federal agencies. While personnel protective equipment output has increased significantly since March, and many new diagnostic tests have come to market, surplus inventories are still months away. That is why it is so important, now more than ever, that VA's supply chain be effective. That means purchasing must be efficient, inventory management must be nimble, and logistics must be precise. Unfortunately, many aspects of the supply chain have been in shambles for years. The organization is scattered, policies and procedures are confusing, the inventory software is archaic, and the medical surgical prime vendor program has been stuck on the launch pad. The Commission on Care issued its supply chain recommendations in 2016. This was the most recent top-to-bottom look at the medical supply chain by independent experts, and it was largely ignored. The Commission on Care pointed out that VA has a lot of hardworking people devoted to buying and distributing medical supplies, but a unified medical supply chain with complete visibility from the medical centers to the central office does not exist. This was the state of affairs as the pandemic struck. There are some significant reform efforts underway, like implementing DIMLs and standing up new regional readiness centers, but given the speed of events, I'm concerned VA may find itself fighting the last war. I understand that VA's rationale for selecting DIMLs as the new supply chain and inventory management system. While there are excellent commercial products available, closer alignment with the Department of Defense through the common system is valuable. Until VA has a modern inventory management system at every medical center, no other supply chain reform can significantly improve efficiency or eliminate waste. However, this project is only in the early pilot stage and completion is years away. even after being accelerated. I am also deeply concerned that Dr. Rowe's request to VA for cost and schedule alternatives was rebuffed. This committee needs to be read in on decision-making for the large IT projects such as DIMLs before VA makes commitments. Turning to the regional readiness centers, I support their objective to increase resiliency by holding larger inventories of key items. However, it remains to be seen how this will be accomplished. Supplies that sit in warehouses and do not move where needed in real time are of no use. Additionally, the regional readiness centers may not commence full operations before the end of the pandemic. Finally, I hope to learn more about VA's strategy to increase COVID testing. The early decision to maximize rapid testing was smart. VA started at the front of the line and secured a large share of limited supplies. But reliance on a small number of companies, all of which are balancing the demands of other customers, has limited VA's ability to purchase greater quantities of rapid test kits as time has passed. Laboratory tests are more widely available, but processing bottlenecks and staffing constraints limit growth. This is a difficult problem that everyone in the healthcare sector is competing to resolve. I want to thank our witnesses again for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to exploring these issues in greater depth. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, General Bergman, for your comments. I'll now recognize our witnesses. First, we have from VA, Ms. Karen Brazel, the Principal Executive Director of the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction, and Chief Acquisition Officer, and the Acting Assistant Secretary for Enterprise Integration. She's accompanied by Ms. Deborah Kramer, Acting Assistant Undersecretary of Health and Support Services, Veterans Health Administration, and Mr. Andrew Centineo, Executive Director of the Office of Procurement and Logistics, Veterans Health Administration. Ms. Brazel will provide the testimony for the VA witnesses, and you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Pappas, Ranking Member Bergman, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the resiliency of the department's supply chain. I am accompanied today by Ms. Deborah Kramer, Acting Assistant Undersecretary for Health Support, Veterans Health Administration, or VHA, and Mr. Andrew Centineo, Executive Director, Procurement and Logistics Office, VHA. The Department of Veterans Affairs, or VA's response to COVID-19 demonstrated the strength and agility of an integrated healthcare system operating as a single enterprise. As COVID incidents varied by jurisdiction and despite global shortages of PPE, critical equipment, and consumable items, VA was able to sustain operations in locations experiencing high demand due to COVID surges. Supply chain challenges are not unique to VA. Due to the pandemic, we are experiencing the same challenges as every hospital system in the country. However, the advantage of being the largest integrated healthcare system in the country, one with 170 hospitals, is our ability to share our supply and personnel resources between sites based on immediate healthcare needs. To be clear, we prepare year-round for all contingencies to include infectious diseases and other catastrophic events. However, the magnitude of this global pandemic has provided the opportunity for some improvements. Prior to this pandemic, VA began transforming our supply chain to increase efficiency, maximize value to clinical customers, and deliver real-time analytics capabilities to support fast and accurate enterprise decision-making. Now more than ever, this work is essential, and we are committed to aggressively driving the change required to improve VA's supply performance. To achieve greater efficiency, VA will strengthen its long-standing relationship with the Department of Defense, or DoD, leveraging their expertise to modernize VA's supply chain operations while allowing VA to remain fully committed to providing quality health care. Through this collaboration with DoD, VA will implement the Defense Medical Logistics Standard Support, or DMLS system, on an enterprise-wide basis to replace VA's legacy systems, some of which were designed and deployed in the 1970s. VA's implementation of DMLS will ensure enterprise visibility and decision support capabilities that integrate with DoD's prime vendor capability to deliver the right products to the right places at the right time. We are aggressively preparing to implement Medical Surgical Prime Vendor, or MSPV 2.0, to replace MSPV Next Generation. MSPV 2.0 will enable expansion and enhancement of future MSPV supply availability and product list offerings, and will incorporate a broader array of supplies and equipment based on clinical requirements and healthcare operational needs. VA intends to establish regional readiness centers geographically distributed to support the 4 Veteran Integrated Service Network, or VISN, consortiums. The consortiums use regional contracts, share full-time equivalent employees and material, and use joint networks for referring patients and conducting telehealth. Transitioning from our current state to sustainable and flexible supply chain operations requires resiliency in our supply chain. Through the establishment of interagency agreements with the Health and Human Services and DoD, VA is ensuring it has enough storage and distribution capacity for the critical supplies. It is acquiring to enable VHA to sustain services to the veterans and the resumption of normal pre-COVID operations. Veterans care is our mission. We are committed to providing high-quality health care to all our veterans, even during these unprecedented times. Your continued support is essential to providing the care for our veterans and their families. This concludes my testimonies. My colleagues and I are prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brazel, for your comments. Our next witness is Ms. Shelby Oakley, Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisitions for the Government Accountability Office. Welcome, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Pappas, Ranking Member Bergman, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for having me here today to discuss VA's supply chain transformation efforts and its COVID-19 response. As the largest integrated health system in this country, VA's ability to effectively and efficiently manage its supply chain is critical, even absent a pandemic. Our body of work has highlighted VA's challenges in this regard for many years, and our forthcoming report on several of VA's supply chain transformation efforts points to continuing challenges. As I begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of VA's acquisition and logistics workforce on behalf of our nation's veterans during this pandemic. It has been a real all-hands-on-deck effort. Our work is showing that VA is leveraging the breadth of its acquisition workforce to obtain supplies. For example, offices that don't typically purchase medical supplies did so, and VA's emergency increase to its micro-purchase threshold allowed staff to buy larger amounts of supplies with purchase cards. Despite its own efforts, VA's needs could not be met due to global shortages. To address any gaps, VA worked with FEMA to obtain PPE, including from the Strategic National Stockpile. How VA identified these gaps in critical supplies, however, has evolved over the past several months. As I testified in June 2020, when the pandemic hit, tracking supply status at its 170 medical centers proved to be a challenge for VA. VA's antiquated inventory management system forced officials to rely on manual daily inputs of PPE inventory from medical center staff. VA has since created a tracking tool to enable enterprise-wide decisions about PPE. However, medical center input remains a manual process since inventory systems at medical centers do not communicate with VA's tracking tool or each other. VA is well aware of the shortfalls in its supply chain management. Even before COVID hit, VA had planned to modernize its inventory management system. However, the rollout of the system at initial locations has been delayed by almost a year, and full implementation is many years off, although I understand VA hopes to speed up this timeframe. VA also has several other supply chain modernization efforts underway. For example, VA plans to implement regional readiness centers to address challenges with relying on a just-in-time inventory management system for PPE during national emergencies. VA is also developing a new iteration of its Medical Surgical Prime Vendor Program, MSPV 2.0. Our forthcoming report identifies challenges with the existing program, some that may be addressed by 2.0. For example, each of the 12 medical centers that we visited in 2019 reported back orders of frequently used items that resulted in delays that were sometimes significant. In many cases, medical staff said they were able to get items more quickly when ordering directly through the manufacturer than going through the prime vendor program. To help mitigate this backorder problem, under MSPV 2.0, VA plans to more explicitly require prime vendors to maintain a 30-day supply stock for regularly ordered supplies. It will take some time to realize the improvements of MSPV 2.0, as VA has delayed its implementation from April 2020 to early 2021. Furthermore, 2.0 will not fully address all other identified challenges, such as manual formulary management that can lead to errors, rejected orders, and greater administrative burdens for logistics staff. VA is also piloting the use of the DLA MSPV program to determine if it's more efficient and effective than its own MSPV program. However, the pilot has already been delayed by almost a year, and our work has found that VA lacks a comprehensive methodology to measure pilot success and scalability across its medical centers. In conclusion, VA has a lot of irons in the fire intended to transform its supply chain management. It is important to recognize that none of these would have completely shielded VA from the supply shortages it faced over the course of the pandemic. However, many of these efforts will dramatically change how VA does business and are already delayed, making thoughtful planning and execution all the more important. Their goals are commendable, and if achieved, would go a long way to increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of VA's acquisition management, which, as you noted, we placed on our high-risk list in 2019. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Bergman, and members of the subcommittee, this concludes my oral statement. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oakley. Our final witness today is Mr. Roger Waldron, the president of the Coalition for Government Procurement, and I'll just remind him to pause a few seconds before beginning, and you have 5 minutes.
Chairman Pappas, Ranking Member Bergman, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the challenges the Department of Veterans Affairs faces as it builds a resilient supply chain. I'm Roger Waldron, president of the Coalition for Government Procurement. Our association is pleased that the committee is focusing on the VA supply chain and its role in delivering best value healthcare to our nation's veterans. By way of background, the Coalition is a nonprofit, nonpartisan association of small, medium, and large businesses representing more than $145 billion in annual government commercial contract purchases. Coalition members provide more than $12 billion in medical, surgical products, pharmaceuticals, and services to support the healthcare needs of our nation's veterans and warfighters. Today, my remarks summarize my submitted written testimony, and I ask that it be included in the record. Coalition members strongly support the VA's implementation of a clinically led program office to develop sound requirements. These requirements define the scope of the VA's formulary and the commercial medical and surgical products available through the MSPV program, through national contracts, and through the federal supply schedules. A clinically led program office serves as the bridge between program offices that generate requirements and the VA procurement professionals and contractors. It identifies, collects, analyzes, and communicates formulary requirements across the department and to industry. Given this central role, it is vital that the program office be managed and led by clinicians. We believe that this management requires the naming of a medical supply chain leader responsible for formulary management and engagement with industry. In addition, it should include the investment of implementation resources to support medical requirements development. Further, this office should serve as a lead industry point of contact to interface with industry. As such, it would provide industry with a clear, direct channel through which it can engage with the department and share the latest developments in rapidly evolving field of medical and surgical technologies. Engagement with industry, however, is just one factor in developing a robust formulary. Input from healthcare providers and treatment facilities across the VA is important, as is the availability of an analysis of transaction data. Indeed, the lack of meaningful, accurate purchase data undermines the development of a comprehensive, holistic formulary. This point is evidenced by the current significant reliance on the government purchase cards, the use of which undermines the VA's formulary because it fails to provide such data. The condition is circular. Treatment centers use a purchase card because the items are not on the formulary, and as a result of that use, the VA lacks the data necessary to improve the formulary. The VA should enhance and expand the formulary to reflect clinical needs. The resulting contract purchases would provide the VA with sound spend data that, when combined with clinical input, can be used to improve the formulary incrementally, enabling the VA to standardize product categories where appropriate while providing clinical flexibility and choice in other product categories. A first step in expanding the formulary would be to allow firms to offer their full product lines rather than picking and choosing subsets of those product lines or individual products. Coalition members also support the VA's efforts to modernize its financial and logistics systems, including the DIMLS pilot. These systems are critical to creating and managing and collecting data to support clinically led sourcing. With regard to DIMLS, transparency regarding the implementation schedule, milestones, and operations will assist all stakeholders in responding to changes in the federal healthcare market. To this end, we believe the VA may wish to consider utilizing an electronic dashboard to assess its progress in modernizing systems. Dashboard would aggregate data in a single tool and facilitate management's ability to make system improvements. A transparent electronic dashboard would assist all stakeholders, including the VA's industry partners, in tracking, responding to the evolution of the supply chain management and implementation of e-systems. Finally, regarding acquisition generally, streamlining procurement processes and regulations would help VA meet its needs. Efficiencies could also be obtained by centralizing procurement operations. This coordinated management could allow the department to focus on all aspects of its supply chain, including small businesses. Chairman Pappas, Ranking Member Bergman, and members of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, the job is complicated, but the suggestions made here could help the VA improve the supply chain programs that serve our veterans. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waldron. The job is complicated indeed. With that, I'd like to turn to the question portion of this hearing, and I'd start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. I want to ask the VA this question, focusing in on modernization of the supply chain. So the pandemic has underscored the need to modernize its antiquated inventory systems and inefficient supply system, medical surgical prime vendor program. The need is so great that VA's decided to accelerate the timelines for adopting the Defense Logistics Agency, MSPV, and DIMLS. However, the initial pilots of these modern systems at VA facilities, as well as other efforts, are behind schedule and facing major challenges. So I'm wondering if you could address that point. Modernization is so crucial. I think you and we would all agree on that. So what's VA doing to speed up this modernization effort?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of the modernization, we're applying an integrated approach. So along with the supply chain, we've got electronic health record modernization, and we have a financial management business transformation. So under my additional role right now as the Acting Assistant Secretary for Enterprise Integration, we've got a team that is looking across the board at an enterprise integrated master schedule. At the same time, we are resource constrained. When it comes to wanting to accelerate the DIMLS program. And Deb, if you want to elaborate a little more on that.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to the committee today about what we're doing. We do want to accelerate DIMLS. It has been a little bit behind. EHRM is the priority, that healthcare record. But to replace the antiquated systems inside of VA, we need to replace the financial management and acquisition system, the supply chain system, and the electronic health record. That will get rid of the biggest share of our legacy systems, which frankly consume the greatest amount of our IT sustainment budget, just keeping those old systems operating. And so that is one of the things that slowed us down. We're investing a great deal in keeping the old systems up, and that makes the finances not available to the new systems we want to push forward.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate the complexity of this, how these systems are interlocking. And I'm just wondering if we can focus on the next few months that might lead to an accelerated schedule of deployment. Can you identify any milestones for the subcommittee that you hope to hit? And if you can be specific, that would really be helpful for us.
Yes, sir, absolutely. The one thing that I would like to announce that we're very proud of is we began the cutover for DIMLs at the James A. Level Federal Healthcare System in August of this year. And at this point today, every system from the technical perspective, the electrons flowing is up and operational, each component of DIMLs, which I need to say is not just a supply chain system. DIMLs also does biomedical equipment management, it does facility management, it does property management, it gives us enterprise decision support tools, it provides dashboards giving us visibility of where material is across the organization. So it brings all of those, not just the supply chain aspect of it. Everything is cut over with the exception of pharmacy. Pharmacy has to close out an existing legacy contract, and on the 21st of September next week, at James A. Level, we'll be fully up on DIMLs operating with MedSurg Prime Vendor and DLA.
Well, thanks for that. I'd like to continue to communicate about what steps need to be taken and how the progress is being made. Ms. Oakley, I'm wondering if I could turn to you. You testified that VA's modernization programs face significant challenges. I liked your description, many irons in the fire, and so there's a lot to talk about here. What challenges does VA face as they try to make these transitions, and is the agency's plan reasonable?
VA faces a number of challenges, and I think if you just look at past performance on making major transformations like this at VA, they have all been challenged and delayed and stopped and restarted over and over again. So the three significant systems that Ms. Kramer mentioned are all happening at the same time, and each on their own bring significant risks, but they're all dependent on each other. And so that in of itself is a challenge. For me to be able to assess the realism of these modernization efforts, I would go back to what we typically look at with any major acquisition programs. I'd like to be able to see the requirements, the integrated master schedule, a risk assessment, and a cost estimate that is based upon all those inputs to be able to provide a really realistic estimation of what it's going to take to roll out these three systems simultaneously within the organization.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that roadmap and hope we can continue to discuss this during this hearing and beyond. My time's up, so with that, I'll recognize Ranking Member Bergman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brazell, I think the supply chain improvements you outlined in your statement are positive, but they do not seem to address the root cause. I would like to read to you a portion of the Commission on Care Supply Chain recommendation from its 2016 report. Quote, VHA cannot modernize its supply chain management and create cost efficiencies because it is encumbered with confusing organizational structures, no expert leadership, antiquated IT systems that inhibit automation, bureaucratic purchasing requirements and procedures, and an ineffective approach to talent management, end quote. You have a path in mind to modernize the IT system, but what are you doing to reform the organizational structure and the bureaucracy?
Thank you, Ranking Member Bergman. I've been at the VA for 2 years now. One of the things that I've brought along is we've got to bring all the stakeholders to the table. First and foremost, we have to define the requirement. And as part of that requirement, Shelby outlined what are our risks and what are the costs. We have a lot of directives and policies. One of the GAO high-risk list items when I came on board, I mean, we had over 30 recommendations that dated back to 2008. So I swiftly got the team together and even initiated GAO meetings so that we could meet together and look at how we can work and reduce some of these recommendations and get the acquisition workforce headed in the right direction. With that is ensuring that our VA policies, our VARs, our VAMs are in line, that we're not providing additional constraints and directives, that we allow that our acquisition professionals, especially those in the field, to have the flexibility to utilize the FAR to not constrain them. We have a lot of legislation as well. First
This
and
could be a 20-minute answer, and I appreciate your level of detail, and if you don't mind, I'd like to move on here, but do you agree that the VHA supply chain should be a vertically integrated business unit from the medical centers to the central office? And if so, are you doing anything to try to accomplish that? If you agree with that it should be vertically integrated, are we got any steps in place we're moving towards that?
Yes, sir. I actually will let Deb answer that since she is over the VHA procurement and has some ideas of how we can collectively achieve that.
Tell you what, is it a short answer?
It is a short answer, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir. We've reorganized the headquarters now. We are actually aligned. Dr. Stone completed our VHA reorganization, central office reorganization just recently. We are now aligned to support the field. And the logistics component, med maintenance are all aligned from the field up to the headquarters. We also have subject matter experts now in key leadership positions. Andrew Centineo, his new deputy, myself, we're all former Army medical logisticians. We did this for real under combat conditions, and so I think bringing that level of expertise to VA is going to help us make progress much faster.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Waldron, you speak for the healthcare companies that sell to VA. I want to thank you, excuse me. I want to thank you for being here, but I also want to read you another portion of the Commission on CARES report. Quote, the organizational structure is chaotic. Contracting operations are not aligned to business functions, and processes are poorly constructed, lacking standardization across the organization, end quote. What pain points does this situation create? What are the barriers to preventing doctors and nurses from getting products that they really need in a timely fashion at a reasonable price?
Congressman Bergman, I would start by looking back at the formulary. The formulary at this point is limited. I believe there's 25,000 items on the current VA MSPV formulary. That limits the choice for healthcare providers in terms of their ability to utilize products that they're familiar with, for example. And that stresses the entire process. And what we've seen from that is this reliance, I think at first choice in some cases, of using the government purchase card to go out and acquire, necessary product for the medical centers and hospitals. That increases costs for the VA. You don't have negotiated prices. Rather, you're going out on the open market and buying and doing individual transactions. So you haven't leveraged requirements in that case that can reduce costs and build up the inventory through a effective.
Yeah,
prime vendor
I'm over
program.
my time, but I agree wholeheartedly, and we'll probably talk more about the use of the purchase card. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your extra half minute of indulgence, and I yield back.
All right, the chair now recognizes myself, Representative Cisneros, for 5 minutes. Ms. Oakley, the GAO has placed VA acquisition on its high-risk list of federal programs. In fact, due to the major shortfalls in VA's medical surgical prime vendor program, hospitals make huge amounts of emergency purchases for basic supplies using government purchase cards and other contracts. GAO has reported in 2017 that such purchases accounted for 20% of all Veterans Administration contract actions at the time. And as you just heard on the previous answer, that kind of adds to the added cost. So what are the problems with relying on purchase cards as far keeping track of purchases and avoiding waste and fraud? And does GAO have any recommendations related to reducing the use of purchase cards and moving to better methods of purchasing?
I think the use of purchase cards is really indicative of an inefficient medical supply chain, right? People turn to purchase cards when they can't get what they need through the formulary, through the existing contracts that are available to them. So inefficiency in those programs are what is driving folks to turn to those government purchase cards. There's certainly more work involved in using a government purchase card because there's a lot of reconciliation from a financial perspective that has to happen when you're making purchases that way. And frankly, you know, the economies of scale that you can get are not, you're not seeing those benefits when you're making those individual supply purchases on the purchase card. So fundamentally, if greater efficiencies were brought to VA's medical surgical prime vendor program, that would, in essence, I think, reduce the reliance on government purchase cards by medical center logistics staff who are just trying whatever they can to get the supplies that their medical staff need on a daily basis.
All right, thank you for that. And also, Ms. Oakley, I serve on the Armed Services Committee in addition to Veterans Affairs. The Department of Defense has a program called War Stopper to help ensure adequate supply of critical items, especially during increased military operations. Can you explain how this program helps DoD acquire medical supplies during an emergency? And does VA have the authority to use DoD's War Stopper program or something similar to build a more resilient and responsive supply chain? And what can Congress do to give VA a program like this?
Absolutely. We haven't done any work on VA in relation to the War Stopper program. I'll say that out of the gates. GAO has done work on DoD's use of its War Stopper program and has reported that for minimal investment, DoD has reported saving billions of dollars in the long run. Their investments in maintaining critical aspects of the industrial base during, regular times, ongoing times, allows them to be able to surge capacity whenever emergencies hit. And so we have reported that DoD has seen a lot of effectiveness with this War Stopper program. That being said, I would turn to VA to ask them what types of authorities that they think they need to be able to use this type of program, whether it's to participate in DoD's program or institute a similar program within their organization.
So I will ask the VA then, can we institute a similar program at the VA?
Yeah. Sir, we think that there may be an issue with the appropriation law that might prevent us from fully using it. The Defense Logistics Agency indicates that they can take our money. I'm not so sure we can use our medical service money to put against an industrial base program.
All right, yeah, that's, I think, something, let's work with you, let's work with the VA to find out what changes we can make to the laws in order to put a program like this in place. We're more than willing to help you do that.
We would welcome that, sir.
Great. Ms. Kramer, in June 2020, you testified that VA supply chain for PPE was still broken, and we heard today the rise of COVID-19 cases earlier this year set off a frenzy where medical systems around the world, were trying to procure a limited amount of available PPE. How was VA able to track, what items that it was buying the right amount of items, and were there any items that it may have just kind of overpurchased?
We track it using the tool that was discussed earlier. It's a manual feed that comes in from each of our hospitals on a daily basis that then is displayed on an electronic dashboard that all senior leaders have access to, so we can see what's going on. I would say that given the current conditions with COVID and the current disruption that remains in the medical supply chain, and we see that disruption remaining for the foreseeable future, that we have not overpurchased. And I would much rather come before you in a few months and tell you I've bought too much than be back in a few months to tell you we didn't have enough.
All right, well, thank you for that. My time has expired. Thank you very much. I now recognize Representative Redenwagen. Nice for 5 minutes.
Chairman, I want to thank you and the ranking member for holding this oversight hearing, and I also welcome the panel. My question is for Ms. Bruzel. I believe implementing DIMLS is a step in the right direction, and I was glad to hear that VA would be speeding up its deployment. However, VA has not been willing to share much information about the implementation program. Do I have your commitment to provide the details of the plan, including the new schedule and the new life cycle cost estimate? Ms. Bruzel?
Absolutely. We are in the assessment stage at this time, and we are going to share all of that information, the requirements, integrated master schedule, risk assessment, cost estimate in the near term.
Thank you. And Ms. Kramer, the Western Regional Readiness Center will be located in California, and it'll cover an area from Texas to Alaska to the islands of Hawaii, where many of my veterans, my American Samoan veterans, get care. This is a catchment area for larger than the other three regions. How will you ensure that the center will be able to supply all the VA medical centers across such a large expanse in a timely and reliable fashion?
Yes, ma'am. The way we intend to do that is by fully evaluating how we support. Right now, we're supporting through a interagency agreement with the Department of Defense, and that gives us the capability that's not just in California, but across the West Coast and into the Pacific Rim, so that we're able to support you using those logistics channels with DLA. It is absolutely essential to be able to support everyone equally across our network. And as we move forward and look at where we may go in terms of a commercial partnership, that same requirement would exist.
Thank you. And just very quickly, Ms. Kramer, VA has discussed cross-leveling supplies across medical centers and across VISNs during the pandemic. I know this is labor-intensive with the inventory management system you have now, especially across VISNs. When the regional readiness centers are established, will you be having the centers eliminate the need to cross-level between VISNs and medical center?
That's the objective. Once all of them are fully operational and fully stocked, we should be able to reduce the burden on the VISNs to have to cross-level. But under current conditions where PPE remains in short supply across the country and around the world, we still see a need to be able to cross-level within the VISNs.
So lastly, when regional readiness centers are established, will VA be able to cross-level between centers?
Yes, they must all be able to communicate, and the idea is to provide the flexibility, the resiliency in the supply chain to be able to react in any area. So if there could be, for instance, if it's in the Northeast and we have a blizzard, we've got to be able to shift operations to another RRC to be able to support everyone else that's in the Northeast. So that's absolutely a requirement. These are readiness centers. They've got to be ready at all times.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Radewagen. I'll now recognize Mr. Bost for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brazil, I have a few questions about the regional readiness centers. First of all, what will make them different from the supply depots that we abolished back in the 1990s?
I'm going to let Ms. Kramer answer that one.
Yes, sir. Well, they're not going to be depots. These are going to be very
Just
much
a change of name, or is it?
No. It's a true change of function.
Okay.
These are not depots. I'm a Desert Storm vet, and I still remember Colonel Livermore on 60 Minutes talking about what we didn't use in New Cumberland. So we know that lesson very well. We're not going to repeat that. The regional readiness centers are not going to displace our prime vendors. They're also not going to hold everything that VA needs. They are focused on readiness only. Right now, that's PPE. We'll also include that to expand to be able to do other natural disasters. And the idea is that material moves through there on a regular basis. It becomes a source of supply for our hospital system. So that material is constantly refreshing.
Good, good. So, but one question I have, and I don't care which one of the two, but you know, your own timeline establishes these regional readiness centers, indicates that they'll not be completed and operational until the middle of next year. And most of us all hope by that time we'll be through this current pandemic, which we sure hope so. But the question then is, how soon? Will they be ready by that time? Will they be able to help? And what are we trying to do to make sure we're getting through this time as well?
Right.
At the same time that we're turning everything up.
Yes, sir. We have actually established relationships, interagency agreements with Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense. We have 3 interim readiness centers standing up today. Perry Point, the supply depot in New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, and Tracy, California. So we already have them established. They're holding material and they're moving material. So we're doing that today. And we're looking at the longer term, though, in terms of what is the right mix of capability to support this mission. Is this commercially provided? Is it done through DoD or Health and Human Services or some combination? And that's what we will decide and implement by next summer. But in the meantime, our capability is up and we are supporting through Health and Human Services and DoD. They're great partners, sir.
Ms. Oakley, you know, supply chains in the VA medical centers were breaking down long before this pandemic. Right here in Washington, we had that conversation early on about the DC Medical Center that had the most high-profile example of this. How many of those problems that we are dealing with now are actually new, and what caused them?
I don't think many of these problems are new in terms of supply chain management for VA. It's typically not an efficient process for being able to obtain medical supplies. Prime vendor was intended to provide an easy tool for VA logisticians to get core items, supplies that medical centers use on a daily basis, just in time. And while generally some of the medical centers have been happy with the performance, we've seen a lot of issues with back orders, delivery delays, and things like that that lead to some challenges with obtaining those core supplies. Some of these things are really indicative of just an inefficiency in the prime vendor process. For example, some of the folks that we met with, they were able to go straight to the suppliers and get the needed supplies that day or the next day, when that's supposed to be the role of the prime vendor. And so that's the intention of continuing to work on the efficiencies of the prime vendor program and make it a more effective process for folks to turn to that instead of things like government purchase cards.
Okay, thank you. I've got another. No, I'm going to not be able to get to that question, so with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boss. I think we'll go for a second round here, and I thank our witnesses for bearing with us. We're not playing musical chairs. We've just got some votes, and we'll continue to cycle up there. I think we have one remaining in the series. But I want to turn to the issue of interagency coordination during this pandemic. And for VA, how can Congress assist in getting other agencies to better work and coordinate with VA? I understand there's some laws that define interagency committees and other requirements for agencies to plan for disasters and other crises such as pandemics. Should Congress update these laws?
Well, sir, a couple of things. One, we do thank you for the CARES Act and what that's brought to VHA and VA as we respond to the pandemic. We would ask your support in helping us reprogram $100 million of CARES Act funding so that we can accelerate DIMLs beginning in FY21. That is one place where we could use some assistance. The authority to partner with DoD in any of its industrial-based maintenance programs would be essential. We don't want to create a separate but equal one. We would rather leverage the expertise and knowledge that DoD has and use what they have. And again, that maybe come down to an appropriation law issue. The Defense Production Act of 1950, that was the Korean War. Everybody was looking outside the country to where the dangers are. And so as all of that process was stood up, it was stood up without the Department of Veterans Affairs as a player. Being able to participate as a full member of the Defense Production Act Committee would be something that VA would very much appreciate the opportunity to do. And then last year, sir, the Bioshield Act of 2004, which moved the Strategic National Stockpile from DHS back to Health and Human Services, at the same time removed the Department of Veterans Affairs as a consultant, a partner in the SNS and what the SNS stocked. We would ask perhaps that you might take another look at Bioshield Act and see if there's a way that we could allow VA to participate and support the Strategic National Stockpile.
Well, thanks for that. I think that's a comprehensive and important agenda, and we'd like to work with you on next steps and legislation, so I hope we can stay in touch on that front. Ms. Kramer, since we have you at the moment, I just wanted to turn to my state of New Hampshire. I was pleased to see you up there a couple weeks ago. We were touring the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute in Manchester, and the facility received some CARES Act funds to create and share a roadmap to bolster America's domestic supply chain for vaccines and PPE. This is a national security issue. We've got to be making more of this stuff right here to take care of Americans. And I was really pleased to see that you got a look around that innovative facility that is helping unleash the bioeconomy in my state. But further, what we saw there was private and public sector coming together to address the immediate concerns around PPE shortages, including for VA, where we have a private sector individual that has helped source millions of masks and many other medical supplies from around the world. Many of those shipments were specifically arranged to support VA's hospitals. So I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit on those efforts and how important that is to VA's overall picture of bolstering its supplies and being ready for the fall and winter months.
We very much appreciate the support of the state of New Hampshire, that the National Guard of New Hampshire, who have met every shipment and help us cross-load into vehicles to get them into our regional readiness centers, and that private citizen you mentioned who's assisted us. He knows the Pacific Rim and the People's Republic of China quite well, because that's where he has done a manufacturing of the medical devices that he invents. So that's, I think, the key thing of someone who understands the environment, has operated in the environment, that has provided great value. We're greatly appreciative.
That's great. Well, we look forward to seeing you up in New Hampshire again soon as additional planes are landing. And once again, thanks for all your efforts. With that, I'll turn things over to General Bergman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity for a second round. Let me just make a little statement here. This is pretty much, this is all IT. Nothing, I'm going to use an example here of plumbing. Nothing about how the supply chain is organized. Bringing back supply depots is a centralized solution that admits the plumbing of the supply chain doesn't flow. We all know what happens when pipes back up. This is actually creating new pipes at the top, not unclogging the pipes, if you will, at the bottom. We still got some work to do here. I'd like to change subjects here just a little bit talk about testing. Ms. Kramer, I'd like to walk through the information that we have on VA's COVID testing supplies. You currently administer and process about 60,000 tests a week. That number consists of about half rapid tests and half lab tests. My understanding is that your goal is to get to between 100 and 120,000. Of the rapid tests, VA buys about 26,000 from, and if I missed the pronunciation here, Cepheid? Okay. And HHS sends you about 2,500 Abbott ID tests every week. How do you intend to get more rapid tests, and are you going to bring another brand of test or hope for a bigger allocation from the existing companies?
Sir, that is not my area of expertise, the technical aspects of that. We'd be happy to take that back and get the answers for you.
Okay, yeah, if you take that for the record, that'd be great. So, and then following up on that, turning, to the lab tests now, VA buys about 20,000 from Abbott, 3,000 from BioFire every week. The rest come from various other companies. I understand there is already excess lab test inventory available, but the bottleneck seems to be staffing at VA's lab. Any plan to increase the lab testing capability now that you've got the goods?
Oh, sir, again, that is not my area of expertise, but we will get the answers for you.
Okay, and I'm not going to, basically, I guess I got a couple of minutes left, don't I? So utilize the time. Ms. Oakley, I am not sure the medical surgical prime vendor program was broken in 2016 when VA decided to fix it. It seemed to work well enough for a number of years, but it seems to be in absolute chaos, if that wording is correct. What is the MSPV's strategy now Do you think it is achievable, and is this program still the backbone of the supply chain?
When VA decided to make that transition to the MSPV NG program, it had a lot of really significant goals in terms of cost savings and standardization for clinical consistency, as well as ease of purchasing. And so what went from a system where folks could purchase hundreds of thousands of items from the federal supply schedules, for example, went to a formulary consisting of about 6,000 items. The challenge at that point in time was that just did not meet the medical center's needs. There were key items that each of the medical centers were still needed that weren't available on the formulary, so they were turning to things like purchase cards. So understanding the fact that that formulary wasn't meeting the needs of the medical centers, VA's changed its goal and changed its focus to just increasing the amount of items on the formulary. The first step in doing that was turning to the prime vendors themselves and having them award the supply contracts. But as I'm sure you understand, the courts found that that wasn't in line with the Veterans First preferences. And so then VA had to make another shift and bring all those supply contracts back in-house. And so while the formulary is now sitting at about 25,000 items under NG, the transition to 2.0 also hasn't been smooth. The prime vendor contracts had to be pulled back, solicitations had to be pulled back at least 3 times and revised to be able to address, bid protest issues. And while supply contracts continue to be awarded on a rolling basis, the beginning of the program has now been delayed to the beginning of January. And so while it's being indicated to me from the things that VA is saying about the DLA MSPV program that while 2.0 is going to be the backbone for a little bit, the eventual goal is to transition to that DLA MSPV program. And we have some recommendations related to assessing the feasibility of doing that in our forthcoming report.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I just have another quick one, if you don't mind. GAO found that between February 3rd and July 13th, about 60% of all obligations, or more than $1 billion, were not competed. And among these obligations was the variance in cost between orders for similar items. I'm sorry, what was the variance in cost between orders for similar items such as gowns and gloves? I didn't know if you had that information to provide for us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Andrew Centennial to see if he has that data.
Hey, Ms. Brazil, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't have the ask. It sounds like maybe the chairman has asked about the variance in price. I can explain that we do vet all of our items that are competed. We look to vendors to make sure that they've met all the criteria. But I need to get back with you to take that for the record on to give you a laydown of what the price variance for each of the PPE items might be.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. That is very important information to know. And I'm wondering if VA does VA provide guidance on what prices were fair and reasonable on conducting market research during the pandemic?
Andrew, would you please answer that?
Sure. So as an example, I would offer, Chairman, that the price point for PPE certainly moved as soon as the supply chain started to be compressed. And that was not just alone for VA. Having worked at FEMA at the same time, we actually provided some of that support to FEMA so they could see where the price points were. Fair market value was assessed using market research from our contracting officers. Certainly has to have to go out and look at proof that vendors are authorized distributors, because authorized distributors will have to actually have certificates and letters. So those types of items for certification have to be verified and validated. We also have to look at Niosh approval. And as you're well aware, between Niosh and CDC, many of the products that needed to be purchased through this pandemic had standards that moved and shifted. So the entire market space had shifted along with the pandemic surge as it came along. But we certainly have the criteria in place for the vetting of vendors to get the items. But the But back to your initial question, the market price and the market value moved on this so much that it fluctuates from the start of this in the February timeframe to the present, and it's a supply and demand. And as you're well aware, you'll hear that items like gloves are significantly challenged right now. Level 3 and level 4 gowns are challenged, and prices went from low market values in the February-March timeframe to peaks in the March timeframe, where they more than doubled or tripled in price. But we did our best with the fair market value assessments that we have, and we actually had to do some things like proof of life to be able to make sure that we had proof of product to ensure that we were vetting the vendors properly and we were getting actual product delivered that met our clinical standards.
Well, thanks for that information. I look forward to any additional detail you can provide. I think that's going to be important for us to know going forward. General Bergman, any additional questions or closing comments you'd like to make?
No additional questions, but I realize I'd like to just restate the one comment about unless we get a hold of an analog bureaucracy in a digital world, we're not going to make the changes we need to make for anyone, regardless if it's just within the VA. So you have the opportunity here to actually create the change necessary across all economic sectors, if you will, within the government bureaucracies. And I really hope that you will continue to work that. It's not popular, it's not easy, but a good bureaucracy looks like a good flowering bush that needs to be trimmed at times to make it healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I thank all of our witnesses for their testimony today. I think we can all say this is a work in progress, and we look forward to continuing to connect with you all as you move forward. I firmly believe that the thousands of VA staff that run the department's medical supply chain are dedicated civil servants who work hard every day to equip VA, and they're among the thousands of VA employees who are on the front lines as this pandemic continues. We thank them for their service. Too often, however, these workers struggle with an antiquated set of systems that are simply not built to meet the needs of today's VA medical centers. This hearing showed that VA's acquisition modernization initiatives, as currently envisioned, will take years to complete, and it's simply too long to wait for this critical function that enables care for our veterans. And the history of VA's failed modernization efforts provide a clear warning that success is not guaranteed. So our subcommittee will continue to monitor these programs in the months and years ahead, and I want to work with VA, with the ranking member and all of our subcommittee members to develop legislation that's focused on improving the VA supply chain. I think we identified several near-term legislative needs for updating the law, providing resources, and putting into place new requirements for interagency cooperation. So I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony, Ms. Brazel, Ms. Kramer, Mr. Centineo. You have a critical role to play in ensuring that VA's supply chain continues to improve. And I think the last several months proved to be an enormous challenge in getting VA hospitals the medical supplies that veterans and workers need. I appreciate your dedication and your hard work, and I hope we can continue to work together on this issue. I want to thank Ms. Oakley and the team at GAO. Your testimony provides an important set of findings, and I understand that the testimony is part of ongoing work that GAO will release in a few weeks, and thank you for that. Thank you as well to Mr. Waldron for your testimony on behalf of the Coalition for Government Procurement. Without private sector companies, there would be no medical supplies, and your perspective and recommendations provide a lot for the committee to consider. So all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous materials. This hearing is now adjourned.